All right. I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of All About Balance. This one is a little bit of a long time coming, but finally we've got here. Today I am joined by the owner of T45 Jiu Jitsu, right?
Yeah, owner and founder, yeah.
Phenomenal owner and founder of T45 Jiu Jitsu, Mr. Ciaran Brohan. How's it going, my friend?
Yeah, pretty good. Not too bad at all. How are you?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. We were just saying off air that you're 2 weeks into your lockdown over in Ireland, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So
Yeah.
week two of 5 or 6, I can't remember which now.
Right. Okay. And how's that going?
Uh, it's okay. Taking up jogging. Uh, so that's great fun with the awful weather that we're having at the moment. And I hate jogging. It's very
Yeah.
not fun.
Oh Jesus. I for somebody that leads a somewhat active lifestyle, I realize how sedentary I actually am. I fucking hate jogging. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, my friend, it's like one of the guys that trains in the gym with me. He's kind of forcing me to go with him rather than
Okay.
me kind of doing it on my own initiative.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd say if there was no one pushing me, I wouldn't be doing it at all.
Yeah, I don't blame you in the slightest. I mean, what are you doing to stay sane in these 2 weeks? I know you touched on off air about Linux and these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I've been doing well. I haven't been doing as much as I normally do, but I've in the last lockdown, I actually got qualified with Sebastian and Adam for yoga for BJJ coaching.
Okay, beautiful.
So I've been trying my best to kind of do that once a day if I can, for a half hour, well, 10 minutes to a half hour, depending on how much I actually how much time I can set aside to it. So attempting to maintain some flexibility.
And what else have you done other than just yoga?
Oh well, I'm a well. I work as a developer as well in a company in Ireland.
Okay.
So
So
I was tipping away with that. But sorry, go on.
no. Feel free. Carry on.
No, so tipping away with my day-to-day job, but over the last kind of 6 months, I've been trying to become a better developer because I finished college like 6 years ago, I suppose. Well, I don't even know, 6 years ago, yeah. And I kind of realized I haven't learned anything new since then. So I kind of took it on myself to try get better at actual being a developer. So I took a bit of a jump in at the deep end and moved from using Windows to Linux.
Yeah,
So
Jesus. I've been in the IT game for about 7 years, and I don't think I've ever touched a Linux box by choice, by choice. But yeah, I don't know why you'd even bother. Like it's awful in my opinion. I mean, not awful. It's awful because I don't know it, right? But why
yeah,
why all of a sudden did you change?
it kind of, I suppose, it's trying to think how to explain it. You have to kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable with it.
Sure.
Like it takes away a lot of the kind of like, I suppose, training wheels and stabilizers or whatever you want to call it that other operating systems have, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
responsible for everything yourself.
yeah.
So yeah, it is actually, it's really good once you get a hang of it. But I suppose the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you're sort of like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Continuously restoring from backup after you've absolutely fucking destroyed whatever you were doing.
Yeah, and then every now and again something like this. Like I was actually like, I have a work PC. It's a running Mac OS. So I was kind of thinking like, worst case scenario, I could use that for Zoom if Zoom decided not to work on this.
Yeah.
So
I
I have
mean,
one backup no matter what.
what what are you deving exactly? What is it that you do?
Well, in work, I'm working on a PHP website, so it's
Okay.
primarily PHP, and a bit of JavaScript front end stuff as well. But in my spare time, I'm doing a lot of Python dev.
Okay.
So, to be honest, I'm very green. I don't really know much about white belt dev, I suppose, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I'm still only getting the hang of it um, in my own time. But I'm kind of looking at different small apps I could make. Potentially, I have a few little side projects kind of penciled out that I may start looking at in the next couple of months with it.
And are you happy to speak about what they are?
To be honest, none of them are fleshed out enough, bar one. One, and I think we've kind of spoken on Instagram about it the odd
Yep.
time, is the T45 online.
Yep.
So I've the first kind of foundations program that we teach in the gym recorded, and I'm hosting that at the moment on the gym's website for the T45 team. But my plan is to kind of maybe build that out into a learning system that like anyone who trains jiu-jitsu can use.
Okay, I like that.
Now, I might not be like I'm not a world champion, but like, you know, I think I know like, well, I know enough to teach people, but as well, I think my style of coaching is a bit different to other people's style of coaching.
And why is that? Well, what is your style of coaching?
Very conceptual based. So it's kind of a thing I've noticed in my own kind of, I suppose, in my own time learning jiu-jitsu. A lot of people teach sort of like, this is the technique, go drill it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very little time spent on the actual, like, how it's working, why it's working, that aspect of it. And I feel like even in T45 with the lads that I coach there, you notice like when you teach someone how it works and like why it's working, they become like way more kind of self-aware of how their jiu-jitsu is working. Like even at a white belt level, you have white belt. Some of the like white belts that train with me will ask me questions that I'm kind of like never even thought about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely room for those kinds of things where, you know, there's something where in the jiu-jitsu space specifically, there's a lot of room, in my opinion, for ingenuity, right, and for development, and that's both in a technical sense and in a business sense. But I've wondered for a long time what that is, right? And I think, you know, you've got the Oliver Tarza, he's a sponsor for some jiu-jitsu blueprint thing, and it's kind of a linear process of, oh, you're doing this, we'll do this and do that. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best thing, but it's a good attempt at something. And then, you know, you've got room for various avenues and things. And I think conceptual teaching one is something that's vastly interesting to me specifically, because like you say, you can go and you can show a technique and you can drill it. And don't get me wrong, you're probably going to learn how that technique works conceptually eventually, because you'll kind of fumble your way through it and figure it out eventually. But I had a really interesting case study from a guy that I think we've spoken about this, but the Scramble Academy, one of the Scramble Academy coaches, Liam Khan, and he took a gentleman that had never trained a day of jiu-jitsu in his life and tried to teach him some concepts for passing guard, right? And then chucked him in a class and see how he did. And it was surprising to Liam how well he was able to implement the passes that he'd never been shown. Like he'd never been shown like, this is a Toriande or this is an over under or this is a leg drag or whatever. But yet the concepts that he was able to apply to a class was very interesting. And I wonder whether that's the next evolution of, I guess, new era of jiu-jitsu coaching, like the more of a conceptual approach rather than okay, my jiu-jitsu is a leg drag to a Toriande to a blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like something I've been messing with, I suppose I brought it into the foundations curriculum in T45 primarily, but we kind of have, I suppose it's built into modules. So it's like 9 weeks of a curriculum and then each week is a module.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than kind of saying like, we're doing Toriando passes or we're doing leg drags or X passes or whatever, we're kind of saying, okay, we're looking at the concepts behind the passes. Like we do still study the different passes and the different types, but at the same time, it's like, what are the kind of underlying concepts behind each pass? And like for the most part, with passes, it's like get control of get them on their back initially if they're not on their back,
Sure.
then get control of the ankles, get control of the hips. And like a huge area I've noticed that people like completely forget about is like once you pass the hips, like you're not in side control. Like everyone's like, oh, just assume you're in side control. But it's like, no, you're actually, there's a whole position there that you haven't even looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool by breaking it down into these little steps. You can kind of like figure out these little niche areas that people are kind of like, I suppose you wouldn't really drill as a position.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like you're approaching the problem of jiu-jitsu like you would the problem of app development or troubleshooting a code error or something similar. And that's something that's
Yeah.
really interesting to me, given that, so I don't dev necessarily, like I'm an infrastructure guy, but I can script some stuff in PowerShell. Like that's one of my things that I do for the organization that I work for. And it's very, very similar, right? Like in PowerShell, generally what you do is you'd take input, or you'd create input X, and you'd store it somewhere, and you'd pass it through a varying amounts of channels to do what you want, which is output X, whatever that is, right? And it feels like you have to understand the concepts of how the language works before you can then go and apply any of the language to either your input in order to get your output, right? And it seems like it's a similar thing with jiu-jitsu, in that, okay, like even before you initiate, let's say, a pass, and you're getting your opponent on your back, well, there's a whole realm, as you spoke of, there's a whole realm of engagement, conceptual engagement, about how you get to a position before you put your opponent on your back, before you then get to the point of controlling ankles, knee lines, hip lines, before you get into the minutiae of gaining side control or whatever it is you want to get to.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of hit the nail on the head with it. It's like trying to kind of, I suppose, like I suppose you've heard Kit Dale talk about stuff, have you? Have you listened to Kit Dale much? Yeah, so he has a really good piece about, I think he was going on about like learning by repetition. Mm-hmm. And if you were to learn every single position in jiu-jitsu, like I don't even think there's enough hours like in your lifetime to drill that amount of jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And like the average person, like, do you know what, like we train what, like 2 hours a week? Well, like I know I train more, but sure, you know, the average practitioner maybe 2 hours a week. And like what I'm trying to do is maximize the amount of jiu-jitsu they learn in that period of time. Because like if you come in and you just train, like if you just come in and you rep, the chances of you actually retaining that are like, if we've moved on to something new the following week, you may not have done enough reps for it to become muscle memory. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to like find that balance between like conceptual learning and drilling for reps. Now, I don't like the way I drill it. I think we've changed that a bit in the gym in the last while. We've tried to make a bit more active drilling, where rather than it just being like, okay, you're drilling a pass with your partner and the partner's just lying there basically giving you the exact responses every time. Mm-hmm. We try to make it like, okay, we touch on the pass and then we're moving with the partner. So we might be like moving just a little bit of dynamic movement every time, that it's not a static drill. Because if it's a static drill, I think after maybe 3 reps, your brain switches off and it's just it's pointless. Like you don't actually, if you have to keep the brain engaged as you're drilling, because otherwise you're not actually retaining any of the benefits of the drill.
Yeah, I agree. There's a coach that we have on a Tuesday at the gym that I train at called Tom Hughes, and one of the things that he discusses. I really like his classes, but the way that he sets up his classes, that you warm up with whatever you want, like some wrestling takedowns or whatever it is, like nothing heavy, nothing crazy. You're just flowing through the motions to get your body moving and whatever. Because I don't know about you, but I fucking hate the run around the mat, do star jumps, do sit-ups, do push-ups. I fucking hate it.
Sebastian from yoga for BJJ said, like, if you do that the only thing that's good for is warming up the gym. So there's no point doing it.
Sure. And then if there's a class of guys that kind of know what they're doing, then he offers a sort of a 25-minute window where you can drill whatever you want, but the idea behind that is your partner gives you a different reaction every time, and a different reaction being like, you know, 15%, 20% resistance, and nothing that you're fighting for that position, because then again, as you say, you're never going to learn the minutiae of the pass if somebody's just actively trying to stop you all the time. But yeah, I like the idea of having different looks, because then both of you are learning, right? Both of you are learning, oh, okay, there's a hole in this pass and that hole in that pass is here. And for the person attempting to pass, you can say, okay, I need to fix that hole. For the guy that's trying to retain his guard and not get past, you can say, I can exploit that hole to retain my guard, right? And I think that that's something that's vastly beneficial. And, you know, how have you seen that model play out in your white belts, blue belts?
Well, somewhat, like, without bragging about the standard of the lads in my gym,
Sure.
There's one guy in particular. I won't name him just
Sure.
to save him embarrassment, but like, he came in, he was 16 years old when he started with me. He's just turned 18 now, and this guy, he's very, very light. I'd say he's under 60 kg,
Mm-hmm.
and the man, like, he'll submit bigger purple belts when they come visit for open mats and stuff. And like, I know there's definitely an element of like they underestimate him,
Sure.
but like, he's just so technically sound with his jiu-jitsu. It's like actually quite scary for me, because I'm like, I have to retire in a few years, because once he starts catching up with me, it's just going to be embarrassing. But the standard, like, it's not even like the standard of what they, when they're sparring, like the standard of like I suppose the actual like knowledge on the mat. For like, the gym is still young. We've been going 2 years, just over 2 years now, and like we have made like a majority white belts, and maybe like, you know, 10% color belts at the moment. Now that'll change, as like, hope we're due quite a few promotions, but with the coronavirus we haven't been able to get my head coach down to do a grading day.
Mm-hmm.
But with some of the questions being asked, and just the knowledge for white belts, like, it's actually it blows me away from time to time. Like, I'm just, you know, if you just ask the questions being asked by some of the guys, you're kind of like, how are you a white belt asking me this question about something so specific?
Sure.
But it's definitely because like I spend an awful lot of time on my own teaching plans, I suppose, and the development of the gym. Like, I know a lot of, I suppose it's one of these things in jiu-jitsu people don't spend enough time on, is that everyone, like, once you become a coach, it's just kind of like, yeah, you're a coach now. Whereas, you know, you have to kind of become almost like a student of teaching, that you have to learn how to teach. Because
Sure.
like, I know a lot of people who coach jiu-jitsu and they just kind of coast by on what they know. And like, that's fine. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, if that's what you want to do with yourself, you know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with just teaching what you know, but, you know, I want to be the best teacher that I can possibly be for people, because people are paying me to teach them jiu-jitsu. I don't want to kind of sell them short by me kind of phoning it in, you know?
Sure. And I think I wanted to get your opinion on this. Like, do you think that there has to be a cutoff where, okay, let me rephrase that question. Do you think that you could be a competitive athlete and a coach at the same time?
I think it depends on the person. I know a lot of like I compete at quite a high level, and like, I think the reason I'm able to do that is I'm quite brutal with my own jiu-jitsu. Like, I don't kind of coast in the gym and just beat up on my students all the time. Like, I try to find open mats that I can train in. I try to get up to HQ and train there as much as possible. Like, it's
For people that don't know, where is your HQ? Who is your head coach?
Oh, HQ is it's in Dublin. So I'm part of T45 is affiliated with Team Rhino, who is under Andy Ryan.
The master himself.
Yeah, if anyone knows Andy Ryan, like, the man's an absolute beast.
Yeah.
But there's about, last time I counted, I think there was about 13, 14 black belts in HQ. And now some of them have their own academies and affiliates, but like as a whole, I think that's the number of black belts within the Irish under Team Rhino. And like I have a real kind of open door policy in my gym that I kind of we have open mats now. Obviously, we haven't had them in a while. With like
Sure.
we haven't been mixing with other gyms because of the pandemic. But before that, we like you could come down to my gym on a Sunday, and there'd be maybe 6 or 7 other gyms, people from like white belts to black belts from other gyms coming in for training. And like I think unless you have the attitude of like you realize you're not the best at like you're the best in your gym, but that's not the best out there. And it's very easy to slip into the mindset of I'm the best out there because you're beating up everyone in your gym. And if you don't have the attitude, oh, I have to go train with people who aren't from my gym, like you still might win. Like, you know, I hate the idea of winning spars, but you still might, you know, have spars that you're tapping people or whatever. But you need to get the experience with other bodies, and it has to be like at least once a week, if not twice, 3 times a week, because you just become so complacent so quickly if you're not careful.
And do you not think that? I mean, back to the previous point. Like I wonder whether it is possible to be. You know, there's always outliers, right? But I feel like predominantly, if you're going to be the highest level athlete that you can be, you kind of have to pile everything into that, you know?
Yeah.
That's my opinion anyway. Like I find that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys have to supplement their training with coaching because there's just not enough money for them to be able to be a full-time athlete in the same vein that you'd see like a semi-professional football player. Or, I mean, you know, hurling is a bad example because they're amateurs, but like amateur in the sense that they don't get paid as much, but you know, but you know, I think that I feel like to dedicate the amount of time that you need to get to the highest levels of the sport, or at least the highest levels of your potential, it feels like you need an inordinate amount of time to get there. And as you've said, when you're coaching people, right? You have to take their training into consideration, their path into consideration, their questions, their time, their needs and everything else. And that must take a considerable amount away from your training.
Yeah, no, I definitely like I agree to like I don't know, like personally myself, I find I can kind of find I have some weird balance that I've hit that I'm like I've improved since I became a coach. I improved more than I was ever improving when I was like a full-time student. Now I don't know, is that just my own teaching methodologies rubbing off on myself that I can kind of like I'm learning as I'm going, or I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't know. But I do agree that like if your primary goal is to go out and win in the IBJJF Euros or IBJJF Worlds, I think you just literally need to like eat, sleep, breathe jiu-jitsu full time.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we think about the huge names in the gi world anyway, the likes of Langacker, Isaac Behanes, Talan Dalpra, Andy Murasaki, Musamechi, Musamechi is a bit of an outlier, I guess, but like these kinds of guys, like you don't see them coaching. I mean, Murasaki may take a couple of classes at Atos or whatever, but these guys are just waking up, training, lifting weights, sleeping, training, Andrew Tackett and these kind of guys. Like, and I wonder what their performance would be like if they were also coaching full time and running academies and being a developer and, you know, doing all these other things.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd say there's going to be a massive shift in jiu-jitsu in the next couple of years. I think like if you look at the likes of the Gordon Ryans and the people who are these full-time athletes, like it's only been in the last couple of years that you're really getting that, because like even like I know what Galvao is like phenomenal and he's one of the best ever, but like he was coaching like the entire time that he was competing really. Like a lot of them, like the Mendez brothers, were probably coaching when they were competing. Trying to think of other examples, but
well, a good example was Robert Drysdale. Robert Drysdale opened a gym as a purple belt and was coaching from blue belt and also won ADCC. Marcelo Garcia, the same, right? Like, you know, these guys, I'm sure Henzo was coaching when he was competing, you know, all the big names. And I think you're right. I think what we're about to see in jiu-jitsu is very similar to what we have seen in MMA, right? Like MMA, the first sort of 10 years of MMA, you could easily find just some guy, right? Some guy just turning up and having a fight in the UFC, top 5, top 10 in the rankings, that also had a full-time job and, you know, turned up and trained 4 times a week and just happened to make weight and knock some dudes out, right? Whereas now you're finding, you know, like the Conor McGregors, like the Israel Adesanyas, like the guys, the Ronda Rouseys, the new wave of MMA fighters that it is their entire life to train. And obviously MMA has the same problems whereby there's no money until you reach the absolute pinnacle of the sport. But, you know, there's also where you're seeing the super athletes come across. Like, I know he's a controversial figure, but Greg Hardy was obviously a coveted NFL player now in the UFC, and turning those physical talents to, I hate the word talent, the physical skills he possesses, the physical gifts he possesses to a different sport. And I think jiu-jitsu is probably likely to see that.
Yeah, I just feel like I think you're starting to see it. Like if you look at the likes of Langaker and Espen, like even like I suppose like Polaris this weekend, like looking at the standard of some of the European lads, it's phenomenal.
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting show, I think.
Which, the Polaris?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm friends with a lot of the lads on the UK team, but I'm finding it hard to see how they win that. Like, without, I don't mean to be offensive to any of them. Like, I have great time for all of those guys.
Yeah.
But it's a tough shout. Like, it's a crazy, that the European team is insane.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was some outspoken comments on the Instagram announcements, and I think what we can derive from that is what we can derive. It's a shame, to be honest. It's a shame because obviously Marcus and Taylor and Ellis and these guys, they're all phenomenal grapplers, and it's a shame that there's been the dispute that there has been. But I agree with you. I think, you know, you have some excellent names in that UK team, to be honest. Like Brad Hill and McGee is absolutely phenomenal. Ari is obviously a force to be reckoned with, and there's plenty of other guys in there that have stepped up to the plate, right, against the challenge that not many people would put themselves in, right? Because you look at that European team, you've got Tommy, Espen, Adam. That's just the 4, right? And the rest of the guys, maybe you don't know them because they may not have as large of a name, but they're all absolute monsters, right? And yeah, to me it's very strange matchmaking. And I do understand why it's been done, right? It's been done off the basis of the criticisms that were made from the last show. Personally, as a promoter, as a matchmaker, I probably would have taken some different decisions. But look, I mean, let's see how it plays out, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it anyway. Like, you know, it's good to see a bit of jiu-jitsu on the screens.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, do you find that you follow all the American shows as well?
I struggle to keep up with it. I feel like there's so many. I'd watch a bit of Fight to Win and a little bit of Submission Underground, but it's more maybe the following day. I just find the fights that I want to watch and watch those matches because it's just too much. And the quality of the cards that the US are putting on at the moment is very hit and miss, I'm finding. Like, there's been some unbelievable matchups, but at the same time, obviously, look, there's a lot going on, so it's hard to find people to fill in spots. But it's like there's a lot of like matches where it's kind of like, I don't really want to watch that because it's too relatively like unknown people for me.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, speaking as a promoter, it's tough, right? Like at the minute, it's tough because, like in the US, it may be a little bit different because you've got the entirety of the US to pick from. But when you're putting together a UK card that's going to entice people to either just watch it or to spend money to watch it, it becomes difficult, right? Because
Yeah,
the interesting matchups from the UK perspective have probably already been done at least once, right?
yeah,
It's hard to
yeah.
find really good, fresh, interesting matchups in the UK jiu-jitsu scene. And I think, for that, Polaris have to be commended because they've brought up a format that offers something new, something interesting, something fresh, with names that likely would very rarely get to compete against each other other than in an absolute tournament of absolute
Yeah.
division of some tournament, right? So for that, they absolutely have to be commended. But yeah, I agree that there's lots and lots, and in a way, it's good for the US scene because they've got lots of jiu-jitsu to watch, right? And those guys are still getting runouts and whatever. But yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. I mean, is there a match that you're particularly interested in seeing? If you could have a dream match of the Polaris squads, who would you put together?
Don't know now. I wouldn't mind seeing Tommy and Brad go at it, to be
Yeah,
honest.
same.
That's one of my.
That'd
I'm
be
pretty
great.
sure they fought before, have they?
Probably,
I
probably.
feel like they have in some IBJJF tournament. I have it in my head, but I could be making that up now. But yeah, that'd be a good match. Hard to see past Tommy though. He's scary. That man terrifies me, to be honest.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, I
Um,
really don't know. I think maybe this is an unfair comment, but I feel like Bradley is one of the most underrated grapplers in the UK. I really, really
yeah,
do. And
no,
maybe it's
I agree.
because, sorry, go on.
No, no, I feel like when was it? Like around the first Polaris, I remember Bradley being like he was the kind of wonder kid. He was like purple belt, like fresh, like killing everyone. And then he kind of, then only did he kind of take a bit of a breather from competitions or something. And then like as soon as he took that breather, it was like almost he kind of went off out of everyone's head almost. It's bizarre because like I think he's probably one of the best coming out of the UK. Like, okay, maybe not the best. There's a lot of good grapplers in the UK, but
Sure.
he's definitely in there with a shout as one of the best. Like,
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I had the privilege to roll with him just one time, but we had a roll, and it was one of those where, I mean, you all have had it, I'm sure, when you rolled with Andy, but it's like you roll with someone and you realize that you know absolutely nothing about the sport.
yeah, yeah, they're good fun, those roles.
Yes. I mean, that's probably a strange way to put it, but I see where you're coming from. Like, it's just one of them where you're like, hold on, this works against everyone else. And Bradley just stands there looking at you like, what are you doing? Like, what are you
Yeah,
attempting here?
I had that rolling with Imanari. It was
Oh God,
like the
yeah.
man was he was letting me pull like my favorite leg lock entries on him and pretty much just smiling at me doing them and then just tapping me and I was like this is depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's a that's a that's a Hall of Fame role right there. Like, I've not rolled with
Yeah.
many names, but Imanari is one I'd absolutely love to. That'd be phenomenal.
Oh man, that seminar, like it was one of those seminars like it's almost like I went and I just feel like he taught like look he taught how to do an Imanari roll. Like he did show a couple of other things, but like what else do you expect him to teach? Like,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
but no, it was yeah, genuinely him now. And I went to a Hamola Baral seminar when I was a
Oh
white
my
belt,
God.
and I didn't actually know who he was,
All
like
right.
hadn't a clue. So I was doing like some mad spider guard stuff, and I was like, as a white belt, maybe two stripe white belt, hadn't a clue what was going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're the probably two biggest seminars that I've been to now. To be fair, didn't get a chance. Did I get a chance to go with him? Can't remember now. Well, it wouldn't have been very beneficial anyway as a white
Yeah.
belt. I couldn't remember it.
It's been erased from your memory at this point. I think
Yeah,
I think the scariest person I've ever seen roll in a seminar is Craig Jones.
Yeah. I've heard stories about Craig.
It's just not even close, right? Like I've seen really good black belts from the UK roll with him, and it's like he's rolling. It's like I'm rolling with my nan. You know what I mean? Like it's just not
Yeah.
close. Like it's scary, so scary. Now, obviously, he's a monster of a man as well. Like he's deceptively huge, but
Yeah, he's really tall. Like
yeah,
I'm like I'm like six or sorry, no, I'm 5'10", and there's a photo of me with him, and he's like, I don't even know how, like he's up here somewhere.
yeah. It's nuts. It's nuts. How? What's your thoughts on seminars? Like, do you how it let's say somebody books you for a seminar, right? How do you approach that?
Like my normal thing is I kind of leave it up to the club. Like I give them kind of a few options as to what they want me to kind of teach, because like I don't want to kind of just roll in and teach something that they don't want to, not that they don't want to learn it, but you know, if I come in and I teach like, I don't know, no gi heel hooks and they're more of a gi club, that's not going to benefit them.
Sure.
Or if they're if it's a very white belt club teaching kind of more advanced like leg locks in the gi, I'm very kind of like, I kind of try to give them the chance to tell me what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, then I just kind of come up with a lesson plan around what I've been doing in the area that they want me to kind of cover.
Mm-hmm.
But as a whole, like I find seminars are kind of weird. Like they're almost the same vein as instructionals, unless you're gone. Like I did do a 4-day camp with Lachlan, and that was very beneficial. Like I learned a lot. Like most of my leg lock game came from there. But I think like you're talking about like what, 3 hours, and normally what happens is you just get bombarded with information, and you're lucky to retain maybe 30% if you're doing well. Like I do take notes when I go to seminars, and like I did a seminar with Adam Warditsky last year in Liverpool, and I did pick up an awful lot from that. But again, if I hadn't taken notes and gone through it afterwards, I'd have forgotten everything.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so I haven't done too many seminars, to be honest. I think, so who have I got? I've done an Ash Williams seminar, a couple of Ross Nichols ones, a Faraz Sahabi one, which was that was weird. That was weird. Weird to just be in the same room as him. You know what I mean? You know, one of them ones.
Yeah.
I was there for the Craig Jones one. And then just a couple of others, I think. But I think probably the best, to be honest, and this is not to downplay anyone else, but it's got to be a toss-up between the Ross Nichols seminar and the Ash Williams one, simply because Ash taught one thing, and it was an arm drag, like his arm drag takedown, right, which he's famous for. He hit on Richard Alicorn and Polaris and all this kind of stuff. But what it was 3 hours in depth on that arm drag, right? And it's kind of like, okay, this is great. And the similar thing happened with Ross when Ross did his butterfly system around the arm crunch, right? Or shoulder crunch, whatever you want to call it, that Gordon Sumagashi thing. And that again was, 3 hours around the same thing and a variety of options from the same position. And I think that's where you get to, where you have one very specific thing that you can get into some real detail in. Whereas I've been to some seminars where they show 15 different positions and you leave and you've learned none of them. You could tell someone, oh, we did this saddle entry from X guard, and someone's like, oh, cool, show me. And you're like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I've kind of like, I feel I've kind of gone away from, not that seminars are kind of something I don't recommend doing. Like it's brilliant to kind of get to learn from other people. Like Ash Williams is someone that like I actually stolen his arm drag takedown as one of my favorite takedowns now.
Same.
And like Ross Nichols, like a load of his butterfly guard stuff I've got like plagiarized and made my own. Like I'm like nowhere near as good as Ross at doing them, but
sure,
like it's like watered down Ross Nichols, but it works for me to some degree. But I think where one of the biggest shifts I had was I was chatting to a friend of mine, maybe, God, I'd say it was a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. My friend Joey Breslin, he's a black belt in Ireland, and he kind of, we had a discussion about like seminars and instructionals and if they're worth doing, and he kind of put me on like just watching tape, I suppose. Like if you're like, if you play rugby, you watch tape. Like if you do American football, you're watching tape of the other team. But in jiu-jitsu, like if you watch someone, like at the moment I'm spending a lot of time looking at Tariq Hopstock. I
Hopstock,
cannot
yeah,
pronounce the
yeah,
second
yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I've been basically like studying how he gets to the Tariq Plata and how he gets to his single leg X, and trying to implement that in my own roles, because like I bought his DVD from the BJJ Fanatics and I was watching bits of that, but I just found like watching his videos on flow grappling, you're actually seeing how he's doing it on a live opponent every time, rather than, again, bringing it back to how I teach in the class. You're dealing with a static situation where you have, in an instruction or a seminar, the person is just standing there letting the technique being done to them, where that's not going to happen in a role or a competition. You have to be kind of like, what are all the variables and what could change?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a Minari who just like, yeah, fuck it, do what you want. I'm just going to tap you anyway.
Yeah.
But I agree to an extent, because like, I think it's okay for somebody like yourself, right, to watch tape because you are aware of the mechanics of what he is doing, right? Whereas if you watch tape without understanding the mechanics, I'm not sure how much you can take from that. I mean, maybe you can disagree
Yeah.
with me, but I'm somebody that enjoys leg locks and these kinds of things, and I'll watch Taza, I'll watch Lachlan, I'll watch Gordon, and they're leg locking people, and because I have, I don't know, 3% of an understanding of what the mechanics that they're doing, I'm like, okay, I recognize that this is this position, and I recognize that he must be doing this, this, and this. Cool. Let me go and attempt that. Whereas if I was to watch Mikey Musumeci bolo someone, I wouldn't have a fucking clue what he's doing. Like, I'd just be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, his leg's weaving that thing, and now he's inverting, and now he's ended up on someone's back. That's cool. And
Yeah.
then if I tried to do that to somebody, it just wouldn't happen, right? So I think there has to be a happy medium. And I think this is something I wanted to get into with you, but I didn't really know how to frame. And it's like, bearing in mind, you've got a fundamentals course, you've got a curriculum, you've got this, you've got that. Like, it feels like there has to be some level of curriculum for, like, and again, it's almost has to be a conceptual curriculum, because you're always going to have people that learn different things at different times and adapt to different styles at different ways. But a rough curriculum of how to learn jiu-jitsu, right? Like I read. Have you ever read the Jiu-Jitsu University, the book?
Yeah.
So yeah, from Saulo Herberio, right? And one of the best things in that book is, it's like 3 pages in or something like that, and it's like the roles of each belt. And it's like the role of the white belt is to just learn to survive, right? And if you don't know how to survive, it's going to be tough, right? Real tough. And then the blue belt is like surviving against better people, but you should now be submitting white belts, and you should also be learning how to do some form of submissions. And then purple belt is, a little bit better, and now you're honing your skill and building a game, and brown belt and black belt and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think like, what do you think about that? Like, having some form of curriculum that pertains to grades?
Yeah, I don't really agree with like kind of making it grade based. I kind of find that's like, after, like, to a degree, there's like a certain requirement at each belt that you kind of have to hit, I suppose. So
And
there
what
could be
is that?
some sort of yeah, you see, it varies, doesn't it?
This is a huge question I have. It's like,
Yeah.
if you were giving out a blue belt, right? What does that mean?
So for my own personal kind of requirements for someone to be a blue belt would be like, they basically can play the foundations curriculum that I teach to some level. Like they don't need to know every single pass that we cover, because they may not, like, okay, they probably would if they're training for long enough to get a blue belt, but they may not have done every pass or done every sweep, but they should be able to at least play guard, retain guard, sweep, pass, maintain top control of some sort. It could be side control or mount, and then advance to take the back and then submit from back, which is kind of the flow of the beginner or foundations. To be able to do that to like a proficient level with their preferred techniques from the curriculum would be kind of my kind of minimum requirement. And then like I think a big part with me would be like their kind of personal, like not personality, but I suppose their attitude on the mats. Like I it's one of these things with me, I think you can't overstate that part of it, because like I don't care how good you are at jiu-jitsu, if you're an asshole, I'm not promoting you. Like I hate, like it's one of my biggest pet peeves is PC. Like not that I don't like seeing people progressing, it's just when someone has a bad attitude, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, where someone gets promoted and it's almost like encouraging their attitude. So like there's a big aspect of that. Now it's something I want to spend time on. I was talking to this with one of my students last week, that I want to kind of have a blueprint for the blue belt. So like basically we have the white belt foundations curriculum, so I want to have like a blueprint for blue belts.
Yeah,
that kind of gives them like, this is now, look, I think once you get past your foundation level and once you get your blue belt, that's when jiu-jitsu really starts to open up. And like, you know, there's too many different avenues, but I think like giving people a core of their jiu-jitsu that like it's their solid basis, that no matter what happens, like if you're a leg locker and everything goes terrible and you get your back taken, you should still have like foundational jiu-jitsu to be able to escape the position and recover back the guard and then do sweep and come up on top if you need to. You know, I think that's a big problem with like a lot of people's jiu-jitsu, like myself included. For a very long time, there was huge holes in my foundations where I'd be hunting legs and I'd forget, like my back gets taken then, and like it was game over, you know. Whereas I'm trying to make this thing where it's like everyone has this solid core of their jiu-jitsu regardless. Now I haven't, like, to be honest, I've gotten as far as blue belt and after that I get lost. So, you know, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, because I think that's something that's so, in a way, I kind of think it's abrasive to the progression of the sport, right? And I don't like the idea of, so I come from a like traditional karate background. That's what I first started. That was my first ever martial art, right? And those were, you literally had a syllabus and there was 15 techniques on that syllabus. And if you could perform them to a proficiency, he'd put you in for your grade and you do your grade and you get a belt. Like, I don't like that. And I think that there's far more minutia to jiu-jitsu than that. But I feel like there should also be a well-documented and accepted guideline of what's expected from you, so that, you know, you'll as a coach, you'll know, and you'll probably have done it yourself. Like when you're a white belt, you get a stripe and you're like, oh my God, I got a stripe, I'm progressing, right? And obviously as you go past that belt and you go into the higher belt, stripes mean less, and you know, the progression you see isn't determined by what the stripes on your belt are and whatever. But like, I think it's important for you as a practitioner to understand that you are getting better, because there's two things. Like I asked for us Sahabi this question, right? Because I was just interested, and I said, how do you one, praise your students when they're getting better? And two, how do you promote progression to your students? Like, how do you show them that they're getting better? And he's like, I don't. I'm like, right, okay, that's a good start, I guess. And I asked him like, why? And he said that the way he determines it is, if you come in at white belt, you're going to get smoked by almost everyone for about 2 years. And then eventually, when you reach your blue belt, mid blue belt, whatever it is, you're going to realize that the new crop of white belts that come in, you're going to start smoking them. And he's like, if you haven't got the commitment to stick in and complete the grind, then you're not going to know that you're getting better. Now, I like that in some ways, but I also think there should be checkpoints in the grind, right? What do you think?
Yeah, like I kind of see that, like jiu-jitsu, like it's not easy, like it's not an easy martial art to progress in. Like, you know, I've been training 10 years now, and like it's not easy. Like you get injured, you pick up stupid little breaks and all sorts of things along the way. But like one of the things that running a gym has kind of made me realize is like not everyone is going to want to compete and like push themselves to the highest level. Like you need to kind of realize that there are people who just want to do it twice a week as a form of their fitness and just to get out of the house for an hour. And there has to be kind of like not a happy medium. Like I think there can be like, you know, we have a competition class twice a week in T45, and like that's like it's like no more nice guy with me. Like everyone like knows that if you're coming to that class, you're coming for hard sparring, and like there's no like messing around about it. Like everyone knows that they're in for a hard time if they come to that class. But there has to be you have to also allow for people who are just doing it as a hobby, which I completely get too. Like, you know, not everyone wants to be the next world champion in jiu-jitsu. And like, I don't know, like my biggest thing is I'm terrible at doing it now, but it's one thing that I've tried to get better at is I try to take notes on. Now, this is something that my girlfriend actually recommended that I try to, because some gym she trained in Canada kind of recommended it to her, or well, not recommended it, but she said that they did it. Basically, what they did is they have like dated notes on each person in the gym, like just a simple note that like he hit a really nice pass tonight, or you know, showing a bit of progression with X guard, or passing from side control or passing to side control or something. And like for myself as well, when it comes to promoting people and like saying someone's ready for the next belt, I rather go back into the backs of my memory to try to remember something that they did well. It's more like, well, no, I have this list of things now, like for my own personal like organization, I need to improve that because it's something I've been slacking on. But I can kind of like, I think, because then it's easier to kind of say, okay, well, look, I can't give you a stripe or I can't promote you, but like here's a list of things that I saw that you did well, or here is a list of things that I think you could do better. And just being able to communicate with your like students and members is a kind of a big factor.
Yeah, of course, because that's the other thing, right? Is it like it has there's and I hate doing this, right? But there's lots of things that pertain to real life or outside of jiu-jitsu life, and one of those things that I think of is like complexity in life. So me and you are having a conversation now, and if I review my life for the past 27 years, I understand that there's a level of complexity to my life. Now, because it's just me and you having a conversation, I can rationalize that your life, however long you've been alive, is just as complex, if not more complex, as mine. Well, jiu-jitsu is similar in that your progression in jiu-jitsu is complex. You've been through many ups and downs and many turns in the road, and you're adapting your style to be something, and maybe you weren't adapting your style to be the same thing 6 months ago. And there's lots and lots of complex decisions and crosses and turns that happen. And if you're a coach, not only are you concerned with that complexity just for yourself and your own progression, but also like how many members have you got in T45?
Say best part of 50, if not more.
Right. So now try and extrapolate that complexity out to remembering the complexity of 50 other human beings. It's almost impossible, right? Because then you add on top of that the idea of you being Ciaran outside of jiu-jitsu and having a friendship circle and a relationship and bills to pay and a job and all these things, right? Like it's almost impossible. And that the idea of note-taking is something that's been adopted by the gym that my girlfriend trains at. And that is a gym that has, 350, 400 members. And the coach there has what's determined to be a little black book, right? And he's going to make notes on you and this, that, and the next thing. And I think it's invaluable, right? It has to be because like you say, you don't want to do a disservice to your students by forgetting them, essentially, even though they're there and you're friendly with them or whatever. But if you're not able to watch every single student, every single class, right, it's just not possible. And there's a horror story, and again, I won't name names of coaches, but there's a horror story that I was told by somebody that I know, and their coach gave somebody a purple belt 3 times.
That's bad. I've had a story similar where, again, not naming names, but I remember someone got a 5th stripe. Like,
oh, no.
the coach came up and they thought they were ready. I think they were like 4-stripe white belt ready for blue, and the coach gave them a 5th stripe on the promotion day. And I think like again, like it's easy to laugh about, but like, man, I can remember the person being like properly like in about it. Like, it's very upsetting and frustrating, like especially when you think you're there putting in the hours. And like, the least I can say is like, if they're putting in the effort, they deserve at least 50% of that effort back.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like I know coaches that phone, like I know of coaches, and I know I've experienced coaches who literally, like, I can't even say they're there for the paycheck because the money is not that good, but like they're just there to be there. They're not there because they care about the gym or they care about the students' progression. They're just there. And like that, to me, as someone who really cares about people's jiu-jitsu and progression, it frustrates me a lot when I see that.
Sure. And I think I'll be really interested to see how you counteract the idea of the blue belt blueprint and then upwards of purple belt and brown belt and eventually black belt, because it's just, I just feel like there's something there. Like we spoke about innovation in jiu-jitsu, right? And I feel like, like let's take the Ruotolo brothers, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Ruotolos were given their brown belt the other day, right? Now, my understanding of the IBJJF rulings is that you have to be a purple belt for 1.5 years. They were a purple belt for like 9 months, right? And to be fair, how can you argue, right? They're out there competing with black belts, submitting black belts. They're not a purple belt, right? It's the same thing of Oliver Tarza and Ethan Krellerson. You know the story of this, right?
No, I'm not. No.
So for us, as spoken about this publicly, that's why I'm okay to say it. But he gave Oliver his brown belt, right? Or Olivier, as he calls him. So he gives Oliver his brown belt, and he gives Oliver his brown belt because as a purple belt, he's out submitting black belts on the regional scene, and he's going up in sub-only tournaments and subbing black belts with relative ease, right? So he gives Oliver his brown belt, and then John Danaher calls him a day or 2 days later and basically just shouts at him for 1.5 hours, explaining all of the reasons why Oliver didn't deserve a brown belt and how for us was wrong and it was disrespectful to give him a brown belt and this, that, and the next thing, and how now Oliver and Ethan are going to have to wait a long time for a black belt. Now, that's nuts to me, personally. Like, to me, Oliver and Ethan are quite clearly black belts, right? Like, quite clearly black belts. So there's that side of the extreme. But then, as you say, there's also the side of the extreme where if you've got somebody that doesn't want to compete, they don't want to be an ADCC champion. They just want to turn up twice a week for an hour, have a bit of a roll, have a laugh, enjoy the social aspect, get a bit of a sweat on, go home, wash their gi, and that's them done, right? Well, they're going to get a brown belt eventually, right? And they're going to get it likely because they're good at jiu-jitsu, right? Fine. But also because of the commitment that they've put in and the hours and the years and what they give back to the club. And I think that, there should be something that encapsulates that knowledge, right? That understanding that a student can go back and look at and be like, okay, Coach Ciaran says the blue belt blueprint is this. Can I do all of this? And if the answer is yes, then they can be like, all right, cool. I know I'm on a good track. I know I am. If not, then they can independently go and check something and say, okay, my game can improve for this or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of hard, like, because you don't want it to be too textbook. Like,
yes, exactly. And this is where it becomes so difficult.
It takes away from what's cool about jiu-jitsu, I suppose. Like, what's cool about jiu-jitsu is that there is no textbook.
Yep.
And everyone has their own, like, everyone's jiu-jitsu is their own jiu-jitsu. There's no such thing as, like, I've learned from, like, I've trained with Lachlan, I've trained with my own coaches, I've trained with, I did Imanari, like, I've trained with Imanari, but, like, everything they've taught me has become my jiu-jitsu, and there's no textbook. Like, even though, like, I have the foundations curriculum, you can see how people are starting to put their own spin on that already from T45. Like, I think we've gone through maybe four cycles of the curriculum since we kind of brought it in, and, like, you can see every time we come back, people are, like, the people who've done it 4 times are the people who are starting to kind of, like, come up with their own little variations and tricks to it. So, like, it's kind of this really hard balance of, like, I want to have, like, this blueprint that people can follow that makes, like, life a little bit easier for them, but I also don't want it to be this, like, you have to learn everything in this book to get a blue belt, because then it becomes, and, like, I don't want to get into a, like, traditional martial arts versus jiu-jitsu debate, but, like, there has been, like, the Mac dojos where fellas are like, you show up this number of times, you can do everything on this, like, list of things, and then you get your black belt, which you don't want either. Mm-hmm. So it's very, like, it's this, like, balancing act between the two.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm glad that you're doing it and I'm not, frankly.
Yeah. But it's quite funny, actually. Like, one of these things that I'm reading a book at the moment. It's a developer book. It's literally called You Don't Know JavaScript. And one of the things he says at the start of the book is, like, you don't know JavaScript, and neither do I. Like, you'll never learn it. Like, you have to just keep learning. And, like, it's kind of the same with jiu-jitsu. Like, if I come out with a book and say you don't know jiu-jitsu, I'm going to have a load of people giving out to me saying, I do know jiu-jitsu. I've been doing it 20 years. Like, so it's this hard balance of, like, trying to, like, I want to help improve. Like, I want to give people this, like, again, like, I'm not going to force anyone to, like, I want it to be a thing that people can, like, use the website once it's finished, but I don't want them to be kind of like, oh, this is, like, the Bible or anything. Like, it's just literally, like, this is a skeleton or blueprint that you can play that I think will help your jiu-jitsu improve. Mm-hmm. And, like, my gym will, like, be a lot more kind of like, this is what we play. But, I think anyone, if they have, like, just a little bit of guidance, because, like, I feel like a lot of gyms, maybe not a lot of gyms, but I feel like there are gyms that people are lacking the same structure. Like, I know of gyms where the coach kind of doesn't have an overall plan as to what he's teaching. He changes it might change every few days or a few weeks. But, like, even, like, some of my friends who train in different gyms have said to me, like, I've sent them videos from the foundations curriculum, and they've literally been like, how come, like, I'm a blue belt, how come I've never learned this? And it's really simple jiu-jitsu, but it's just stuff that, now, it might not be something the coach, like, it's not faulting the coach, but, like, it's very hard to kind of, like, iron out what you need to teach people. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I completely agree. Yeah. Because, where this becomes even more squirrely is you've got a fundamentals course, and there'll be something that somebody comes along and says, well, this is a fundamental that's missing from your course. Why was I not taught it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's no agreed base of fundamentals. There's just what you determine to be the fundamentals. Yeah. And I think this is where, you rightly touch on, it's not a traditional martial art versus jiu-jitsu debate, but it's like jiu-jitsu is still, frankly, so young that even the person that says, oh, I know jiu-jitsu, I've been training for 20 years. Well, I'm sure that if they watch something that Lachlan or Gordon or John has put out, there's probably something new in there. There's probably a little wrinkle that you've not seen before, or a different way of phrasing, or a different way of approaching that you've not seen. And it's because nobody yet has managed to get to a position where, like, jiu-jitsu is still this bubbling volcano melting pot that hasn't quite settled into rock yet. And when it settles into rock in probably about 100 years or something, then people will be able to be like, these are the fundamentals and we're relatively confident on them. But until then,
Yeah,
as
but
you
even
say,
then, like,
I mean, yeah, even then, you know, like the only reason why I say that is it's like wrestling, for instance. Like, my wrestling coach has an understanding of what the fundamentals are to wrestling. Right now, again, if I was to go to Dagestan and ask them what the fundamentals of wrestling were, or I go to, you know, Romania, or I go to the US, or I go to wherever, and I say, what are the fundamentals of wrestling? The likelihood is I'm probably going to get a different answer, which just completely destroys the point I was about to make. But, you know, I think that they're at least being in the pursuit of being in this pursuit of an explicit answer to questions in jiu-jitsu is a good place to be, right? You're adding to the pantheon of knowledge.
yeah, like another thing that I'm kind of trying to spend a little bit of time on now, it's sort of, again, like I call it wishy-washy jiu-jitsu because it's not really something you can drill.
Twisters.
But it's like just a concept and like the like not the technology, but the terminology behind the concept.
Yeah.
A huge thing that I've spent time on is this whole like alignment theory. I don't know if you ever heard of alignment theory in jiu-jitsu.
Tell me.
Okay, so we're getting into like the wishy-washy stuff.
Let's fucking do it. I'm ready.
So alignment is, there's three aspects to your alignment. There's your posture, which is your spinal alignment. There is your base, which is your ability to generate force from either the floor or your partner. And then there's your structure, which is normally your frames or your whatever way your arms are positioned. And essentially you can apply this to pretty much any position in jiu-jitsu. So if you looked at, for example, I don't know, side control. So if you're in side control and I'm lying flat on my back, I have my two frames in, I have my feet on the mat, and I'm looking directly at you. I have spinal alignment, I have structure in my hands, and I have my base in my feet ready to create a bridge to shrimp and escape. Now, if I'm playing top position in this scenario, that if I can initiate a scenario where I've turned your hips away, so your feet are no longer able to base off the mat to create a shrimp or a bridge, if I can beat your structure, so getting underneath your arms, if I can create pressure underneath your jawline or on your chin to create your spine to turn away from me, I've taken away all 3 points of your alignment, and ideally I'll have all 3 of mine. So therefore I've completely disrupted your alignment, and I'm in a position that I can start isolating limbs to progress to the submission. Now that's just like one way it could be applied, but like if you literally take that one concept of just alignment and try apply it to anything in jiu-jitsu, I can guarantee you'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I taught this to one of my students, and your man was literally just like, cool, I know jiu-jitsu, I'm going to go home now.
But I think there's something to that.
But it's like, but it's like something I've been looking into it, and I swear, like, brought into some of the wrestling techniques I'm teaching, brought into sweeps, brought it into passes, brought it into pretty much all of the jiu-jitsu I teach. And again, it's really cool that you have this one concept to kind of anchor all of your techniques to, so that when you're learning techniques, you kind of can always go, okay, well, if you kind of forget in a role, you're like, oh, what did I do wrong there? You can literally just like quickly say, okay, what's missing? figure out where you're not taking away the alignment or not taking away the structure, and then continue with your technique. And again, it's this kind of like I had a word for it, but I'm after forgetting it. But it's basically like you're thinking, you're kind of like, I suppose you're cognitively thinking the entire time that you're doing your jiu-jitsu. It's not just, you're not just making decisions based on, oh, coach taught me this move, I should go do this move. You're more kind of in the moment, kind of saying, okay, well, looking at your opponent, where's his points of alignment? And if I can start to take those points away from him, I'm either going to be able to sweep or control him. Or again, from an escaping perspective, you reverse engineer it. So you're trying to get back your points of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I feel like, do you ever see the Charlie Day meme of like Pepe Silvia?
I have not, but
It's just the big whiteboard of all of the connecting dots. That's what I feel like.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think there's absolutely something to that. And I think that that's something that for sure is taught in a way that you're subconsciously understanding it, but it's very interesting to have it explicitly noted to you. To break down in a position like side control, for instance, instead of being like, oh, I'm creating shoulder pressure here because it's uncomfortable for them and they're going to give up mount because of it. What about when they don't give up mount because of it and they just take the discomfort? Like, what does that mean? What happens then, right? So understanding, okay, well, if that's because you've only ticked off one of the three things. You've disrupted the alignment of the spine, but you haven't taken away the base. You haven't controlled the structures. So if you were to, as you say, as you're troubleshooting your own roles, for instance, or troubleshooting as you're drilling, to be like, okay, why am I not doing this? It's very similar to something I was taught in troubleshooting IT problems, right? It's either permissions, firewalling, or name resolution. Like, it's one of those three things, like figure out which one it is. And, that's served me well in my God knows how many years. And I think drilling that into somebody, pardon the pun, but drilling that into somebody from a very, 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 very fresh green level is something that is almost certainly going to prove to pay absolute dividends in the future.
Yeah. And it's like one of these things, like, I think the first time I explained it to the guys, it was, I literally think I kind of derailed the class for a half hour and spent a half hour going through it. But since then, it's been like, I don't have to go through it as in depth every time. It's like enough of the class have like come across me talking about it or have heard me reference it to understand what it is, or there's enough people to kind of like piggyback off that they kind of know the concepts that they can kind of like, if you don't know, you can ask your partner kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, in terms of the understanding that the lads have, like, of just the body mechanics behind and the understanding of why they're doing stuff is like really high, because we have this kind of whole concept from literally from day one. Like, I will start teaching day one foundations beginners this whole alignment theory or alignment concept from like their first class. And it's like something I'm really kind of trying to do with the foundations curriculum as well, is like, you know, the white belt armbar, the closed guard armbar that everyone learns day one in jiu-jitsu, that does not work. Like, I've never once hit that armbar on anyone. Like, it's just, I don't know
outside
why.
of white belt, maybe.
I don't even remember hitting it at white belt. Maybe like I could probably hit it on a white belt now if I wanted to, but again, like, you're being taught this thing, and then like, I don't know, 6 months later, you're taught a different way of how to do it, a better way. Whereas like, why teach people the white belt version when they're going to have to like learn the correct version in 6 months' time? So it's one of these things I'm trying to do, is like, I want to teach people to be black belts from day one. So the technique I'm teaching won't change depending on how long you're training for. Like, you're literally learning kind of the finished version of the technique from day one, because like, I just think like it's just an incredible waste of time to have like techniques that are for white belts or for beginners.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually. I think that's a really interesting point. Like, And I agree. I absolutely agree. Thinking about it, like I'm not sure. Have I ever hit? I don't think I have actually. Maybe I have at white
Yeah.
belt. Maybe I have. But then, I mean, shit, I couldn't tell you last time I armbarred someone, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point about, and I think that's a really golden nugget actually, is teaching people the black belt version of everything from day one, right? And look, it's good to understand that the fundamentals of that armbar is we're going to break somebody's posture, we're going to isolate a limb, and then we're going to try to put on some, mechanical braking techniques in order to gain a submission, right? So those are valuable lessons, but as you excuse me, as you've rightly already pointed out, those can be done conceptually, and with the 3 pillars that you talked about, the alignment theory, they can be done in exactly the same way without showing somebody something that's very low percentage, right?
Yeah, and like another thing I try to do as well is like I don't teach close guard anymore to beginners.
Interesting.
And the reasoning is like I'm sure you've experienced it where like you roll with a white belt and they get close guard and it's like a safe space.
Sure.
So the rest of the roll is they're in close guard and they're just going to try a couple of terrible submissions and not go anywhere.
Sure.
Whereas like the foundational guard that we teach is seated guard. So you're literally like on your ass in front of your partner. And from there we look at engaging from there, attacking tripod sweeps, attacking the single leg X sweep, attacking the dummy sweep and the double chin sweep. So literally those like 3 or 4, well, there's about 7 sweeps I think we could cover, but basically what it does is I suppose it kind of instills this logic that like you're not afraid of playing close, or you're not afraid of being in this open guard position, that you're like happy to play that position. And like if I could ban close guard till blue belt, I probably would. But I think like close guard is brilliant, and like if you want to learn close guard and submit people from close guard, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think at a level of like understanding jiu-jitsu, I think close guard is a really bad place to start for people. Like I think it's just, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain.
No, I kind of get.
It's kind of similar to. It's similar to a wrestling video I was watching talking about the double arm, like the double collar tie. So that when you and your partner both have a collar tie, and like again, it works to a certain degree. But if you're with someone who's good at wrestling, that double collar tie is going to get you sent airborne in about 5 seconds, because they're just going to do a throw by or a snap down from there or something. And it's the same with close guard in jiu-jitsu. Like close guard is really good if you're good at it. But if you train with someone who's like any bit decent and you're not the same level with your close guard, you're not going to be able to play close guard. And it's really frustrating then for white belts who are rolling with a colored belt, and then the colored belt is just refusing to go into close guard, or he's playing some, like he's running around passing standing, like, and that's really frustrating then for a white belt to have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think something that's really, really interesting about what you've just said, and it's probably a bit of a minute point, but something that's in my own journey, something in my own learning that I wasn't shown is how to engage outside of a guard, right? Like a conventional, it was like, okay, today we're going to do a half guard sweep or a half guard submission or whatever it is, or we're going to do a submission from close guard. And one of the questions I always had, but never really had the confidence to ask is, okay, but how do I get to close guard? Like, how do I get there?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do I do? You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, so now when you're being from open guard, essentially that's a little bit more natural. It's a bit more natural to be like, okay, the likelihood is if I pull guard and I fuck it up, I'm probably going to end up here. Or even if I pull guard and I attempt to end up in close guard, but I fuck it up, and the person disengages from whatever rubbish scramble ends up from a dodgy guard pull, then this is where we are, right? We're in a position where I'm sat, my opponent is standing, and either I have a one grip, both grips, or no grips, right? Whether that be gi or no gi, right? And I think that's a really interesting starting point, because it just feels a lot more logical, a lot more sensible, and a lot more beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think, yeah. Because I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
there's a time and a place to be like, okay, we're going to drill takedowns, and from the takedown, you're going to end up in a side control. Cool. Because sometimes you go to competition and you see it happen, right? You see a guy get taken down and end up on bottom side control instantly. Cool, fine. But you also don't want to be like, okay, so day one white belt, we're going to teach you how to react from a poor defensive position, right? Like I think starting from open guard is something that's brilliant, really brilliant.
Yeah, it's something like I've kind of like, I suppose there's been a few iterations of the foundations. Like there was I had a beginner's course the entire, like since I started with T45, there's been kind of the foundations curriculum. It's just never been kind of ironed out until recently. And a big part of that was like, I suppose I never, like in my own gym, like where I started, there was no progression for foundations. Like it was literally whatever we were doing that week. And I kind of guess like I didn't want, like, it was actually, to be honest, the reason I moved away, like I was teaching close guard as a guard for a long time, and it was actually my girlfriend was training with Ash Daly,
Yep,
who's
monster,
an Irish black belt.
Monster.
Yeah. She's terrifying. But my girlfriend was actually talking to Ash Daly about the women's classes in T45, and just asking for different, like, you know, what should she teach, different ideas. And Ash was saying like she doesn't really teach close guard to the beginners at all, because again, it just, they just think that's a safe place. And like it is, like, look, again, close guard works. Like there's some really good people playing close guard, but to learn jiu-jitsu, you need to be willing to kind of open it up and like get your guard passed and like play those open scrambles, because otherwise you're just going to be boring for 6 months or 7 months before you get out of that slump of playing close guard.
Have you, you know Jude Samuel, right?
Yeah.
One of the scariest close guards ever. Fuck, ended up in there. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. I'm okay. It's okay. It's okay. Honestly, it's fine. It's okay. But
no, I've like, who was I training with? There was someone I was training with, and their close guard was, Hafil Domingos. I don't know if you ever heard of him. No, he was actually like, I think he fought on a few EBIs, maybe. Okay. Yeah, he's kind of like, he's a phenomenal, like one of the most explosive people I've ever trained with. Like the guy will backflip over your guard, like he's ridiculous. But his close guard like was so, like if he put you in his close guard, you were either getting cross choked or armbarred, and it was just like it wasn't a matter of like if, it was a matter of when.
Right.
Yeah, it was terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a guy, one of my coaches, Tommy Yip. He doesn't play close guard too often, but if you end up there, you're getting triangled. Like within 45 seconds, you might as well just like stop the counter, restart it at 45 seconds and see inside those 45 seconds when you're getting triangled. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I think the last topic I'll bring up with you is I want to hear your thoughts on the IBJJF opening up hill hooks for brown belts and black belts in no-gi competition. What do you think about that?
I'm personally, I'm delighted because I play a lot of heel hooks.
Yeah.
Like for me, for the last year and a half, 2 years, I was straddling two rule sets, because obviously I compete in sub only, and like sub only is probably my kind of like my main forte. But I obviously wanted to kind of get the status that comes along with winning the IBJJF Opens.
Of course, yeah.
And trying to straddle those two rule sets, like I lost a match there in the Berlin, or it was either the German Nationals or the Berlin Open. And again, it was a ref that didn't understand the reaping rules correctly. So I wasn't reaping, but I was playing saddle, attempting a knee bar. He called it, and then I thought he was going to disqualify me, and then he went back on it, but then he reset us in a different position completely. And it was kind of like, well, if you're going to disqualify me, or else put me back in the position that I had gotten.
Yeah.
You know, it was just so it's a very weird kind of situation to be in. I suppose like everyone had to, like if you were serious about jiu-jitsu, you kind of had to be straddling those two rule sets. But like for me personally, I think it just means I'll go a bit more, and I think this is what you're going to see, is that you're going to have like the guys who play a lot of no-gi are just going to specialize completely in no-gi, and then the guys who are kind of more gi are just going to stay in the gi.
Mm-hmm.
And like there already was a split, but I think you're going to see it even more defined in the next kind of 2-3 years.
I couldn't agree more. I think what it is, though, is an absolutely brilliant money-making scheme from the IBJJF. Because if you think about it, like there's not many regional competitions that will allow you to heel hook, right? Naga is probably the first that I can think. I don't think grappling industries will allow you to heel hook in no-gi at the higher belts.
In the expert division or whatever.
Yeah,
it's
in
called,
the expert division, exactly. But see, Naga is interesting. Naga will allow you to do it in intermediate, advanced, and expert, I think.
It's advanced expert for heel hooks for some reason. I have it in my head, but I could be wrong.
Well, I jumped into an intermediate comp and was able to heel hook. Intermediate division was able to.
That's
so, but anyway, like I think that's really interesting, because you could be a blue belt and be heel hooking people in Naga, but then equally you could come up against the purple belt and get heel hooked. Like who knows? There's a whole other discussion I think about belts in no-gi, but yeah, like I think what it does is it really cements the IBJJF's ability to attract the bigger names of the no-gi circuit to turn up and pay money to compete, right? Because, you know, you don't see a Craig Jones competing at Naga, right? You don't.
No.
You don't see a Craig Jones competing at Grappling Industries, right? But what you're now going to see is potentially Craig Jones turning up at No-Gi Worlds in black belt and maybe winning, right? Maybe slaughtering everyone with heel hooks. Who knows, right? You may see a Gordon turn up at an IBJJF, No-Gi Worlds, No-Gi Europeans, you know, and those things, you know, that does massive amounts for the sport. That does massive amount, not for the sport, sorry, for the IBJJF. That does huge things for them as a company. So I think from an economic perspective, it's an absolutely brilliant move. But I agree with you that this is absolutely going to, if it wasn't already, and it was in my opinion, I'm in the same camp as you, but it really does divide the sport. I think you're going to see, probably the end product of this is you're going to see gyms split as well. Like 10th Planet at the minute is an outlier because it's a gym that only does no-gi jiu-jitsu. I think you're going to see more and more gyms that only offer gi or only offer no-gi jiu-jitsu, I think.
Yeah. No, I to a degree, I think that was happening already. Like if you look at the likes of Ross Nichols' gym.
Yeah, like, Grand Union, yeah.
Yeah, Grand Union is fairly no-gi heavy as far as I know.
So it's kind of split. I train there. Well, I was training there before lockdown, semi-regularly. Like it's kind of split 50-50 to be honest. Like Ross does the no-gi program, but you've got Igor and a couple of other guys that are teaching the gi programs. So, but for sure, Ross's classes are no-gi classes for sure.
Yeah, Ross is like, you know, but I suppose like it brings it back to like something I was chatting to Espen about at a seminar. So I did a seminar with Espen there 2 years ago, like in December 2 years ago. And before the seminar, I was just chatting to him and he was asking like, did I do more gi or more no-gi? And I was kind of, at the time, I kind of straddled almost equally. Like, and like I still do in terms of my coaching, but in terms of my actual like focus, it's just been no-gi for the last year and a half that I don't really like. If you roll with me in the gi at the moment, you're just getting like a watered down version of my no-gi game, because I'm not really like, I'm not trying to focus on any, like, I was messing with worm guard for a while, but that was a phase.
Yeah.
But no, I've become very focused on like my game is my game, and no, like my no-gi game is that's my game, and I'm trying to like. And the one thing that Espen said to me that kind of cemented that for me, he was just like, because I was asking him about doing, was he ever going to compete no-gi, and he was just like, well, why would I want to be kind of okay at two when I can just be really good at one?
Yeah.
And I think that's becoming what's happened, like, because like you can't being realistic, like how can you like learn everything in jiu-jitsu? Like you can't like I can do barambolos, but am I good at them? No. So like there's fellas who are fantastic at barambolos in the gi, or worm guard as well. Like fellas are fantastic at worm guard, but are they as good at like playing leg locks as like I would be, mate? And it's just like, it's no fault of anyone. It's just there's too much to focus on for any one person. Like as soon as you take your focus off, like if you're working, I don't know, heel hooks from X guard or heel hooks from reverse X or whatever, as soon as you take the focus off to start learning some more gi heavy techniques, you're going to start hitting that weird kind of you're just gonna like, it's not even weird, it's like you can't, like, you're focusing on one, as soon as you're focused, it'll just shift, that will drop and that will come up. So, it's impossible to keep your focus on everything.
And I think that relates nicely to what we were saying about being a coach and an athlete. Like, and that kind of supports what I believe is that you kind of have to be one or the other in order, if you're going to reach the highest levels of it. And like, I much prefer no-gi, right? But I sort of said to myself that I was going to dabble in the gi again because my gi game is absolutely atrocious, right? Like I look like a fish out of water, honestly. Like it's disgusting how poor it is. But I do sit with you that my no-gi game is so far superior to my gi game. And that's not to say my no-gi game's good, right? Like, let's not get that twisted. But in comparison to the gi, it's so different. But I feel like, I have this overarching feeling in my life that we as humans, all we're really here to do other than procreate is just add to the general consensus that is the pantheon of knowledge, whether we determine that to be consciousness or whatever it is. Like there's some form of overarching transcendent knowledge base that we're all adding our lives into via some feed. And I kind of feel like you have to be in pursuit of excellence of something, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if you fuck it up. It doesn't matter if you never get there. But in the fact that you're committed 100% to the pursuit of something, that I feel like that is a worthy cause. And I agree with Espen in wholeheartedly, frankly, that, sure, like let's say Tommy Langacker or Espen jump into ADCC. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, depends on who they end up with, but
I mean, likely
they're like fish.
I mean, they're probably going to look all right? But they're probably going to lose to leg locks, right? Yeah. Probably. Like if you go and put Tommy against Craig Jones, what's going to happen? The likelihood is Craig Jones is going to finish him with a leg lock, right? And we see that kind of with Roberto Jimenez, right? Roberto Jimenez is an absolute phenom. But he's only really just started developing a leg lock game at black belt. And then we saw Craig Jones was like, cool, I'm going to exploit that. That's grand. We saw it with Gordon Ryan and Cyborg, right? Cyborg was able to negate some of the leg lock stuff, but then Gordon started ramping up the pressure and turning up the gears, and he eventually caught him, right? Like I think, unless you're Felipe Pena, right, who's kind of the outside of this whole thing, or maybe Leandro Lowe back in the day, but it's so difficult now, in my opinion, to bridge both at an exemplary level. I think gone are the times that you're going to see somebody like a Hodger Gracie who will win IBJJF Worlds and ADCC.
Yeah. Now
In
you
the gi,
say that, but JT Torres is another outlier there.
So you're absolutely right, and I think as we've said, like JT Torres, you're definitely going to have these outliers, and there's always going to be an outlier, right? Always. I will be very interested to see what happens with the new breed, because like the Riotolos, they're still competing in the gi and they're still competing no gi, right? Maybe they're going to prove me wrong entirely. In my opinion, the Riotolos are the next outliers, right? Because those kids have been training for so long at such an incredible gym, in such an incredible facility, and they're obviously incredibly dedicated and incredibly talented. Sorry, incredibly skilled, not talented, and they've put all this amazing amounts of effort in, and the result is that they're really fucking good, right? Like really fucking good. And maybe they're the next one, but then we're going to see somebody like Nikki Ryan, who I don't think, maybe at white belt, maybe at blue belt, but I don't think we've ever seen him compete in the gi consecutively, right?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, to be honest with you.
But no gi, I mean, he's a destroyer.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is definitely, I feel like that's the future. The future is it's going to be two different sports.
Yeah, no, that's something I've been like, my own, like I've seen it with a few places, like Chris Thompson from Grapplefest kind of has it in his head that like no-gi is becoming submission wrestling or submission grappling.
Yeah.
And gi is jiu-jitsu. And like there is a split almost starting. Like
yeah.
I see that argument. Like I think there's going to be a split. Like I can't see the rule sets are not even the rule sets, but the technique bases are becoming so divergent that it's like it's not even like you can. I don't even know, is it possible for someone to be able to know all of the new intricacies of the new techniques that are coming out?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, like, I spoke to Rob Drysdale on the podcast, like, at the very start, right? And I asked him this question, like, how does he feel about gi and no gi? And he's like, they're the same sport. It's always the same. It's always going to be the same. And I do understand why he says that. And the reason why he says that is he uses the word fundamentals, but he's like, the fundamentals of the games are the same. In that, there's the same guard, the same alignment philosophies can be pertained to both, etc., etc., etc. And I think that's right for now, because you know, in the gi, worm guard, lapel guard, these kind of things. I mean, lapel guard less new, but worm guard definitely new, and all of Keenan's inventions and adaptations to inventions are almost brand new. They're definitely a fresh look on things that may have been invented before. Heel hook's the same. Obviously, there's that super famous picture of Helio heel hooking somebody with absolutely no fucking knee or hip control, but doing so in the gi, right? So it's not like heel hooks are new, but absolutely they were something that have been revitalized by Dean Lister, and then obviously by John and Eddie and both Eddies and these kind of teams. But you know, it's something that I feel like I'm going to use the same thing as MMA, right? So in MMA back in the day, what was so good about it, UFC 1 was Royce Gracie was a jiu-jitsu guy, and they put a boxer in there, a kickboxer in there, and some sumo guy, right? Cool. Now you look at Demetrius Johnson or Zabit Magomed Sharapov or any of the new kids coming up, and not that DJ's a new kid, but that is an entirely different thing. That's not having a little bit of wrestling defense and some good stand-up and going into the cage and seeing what happens. That's an entirely different thing, and that martial art is called mixed martial arts. And it's being able to blend all of those things together. And if you put DJ against any 135 or 10 years ago, it's a bloodbath, right? It's not even close.
Yeah.
if you put Zabit Magomedsharipov against anyone 10 years ago, it's not even close. So I think the same thing will happen with jiu-jitsu, that eventually you're going to find that it splits into this new, it's evolving, right? It's evolving. It's not that it's degrading, it's that it's evolving. It's that there's too much gi knowledge and too much no gi knowledge to stay in the same thing. And it's going to evolve and it's going to break out. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Like, I can't see, like, I think like the split is, I feel like it's already started and we're like in the middle of it. Like, you can see it. Like, if you look at the likes of, like, again, there is the outliers, but like the majority, like, I'm trying to even think now of people like, but Craig Jones, like, when was the last time we saw him compete in the gi? Like,
Purple
I
belt.
can't, you know, purple belt. Yeah, exactly. And like Gordon Ryan put a gi on for 4 weeks or something, like,
To put
you
some
know.
Instagram photos. Yeah, probably didn't even roll.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, so it's just like, and I'm pretty sure Keenan actually got in trouble for saying this on his podcast, but he said something about the likes of a purple belt today would beat black belts 20 or 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, so what he said was a purple belt, a good purple belt now would destroy Hickson Gracie in the gi.
Okay, well, that's well, like, I
Is he wrong though?
I don't like,
I mean, it's
I don't
hard
know,
to
is he wrong, but I've like, not that I think he's right or wrong, but like, I can see the point he's making. Like,
Absolutely.
it's 100% true. Like, if you look at, like, if you go back, I don't know, maybe not like first, like, one step, but if you go back 2 steps, like, I'd say like the standard of jiu-jitsu in like the current level of black belt versus 15 years ago, like, and again, like, obviously take into account like sizes and weights and all that kind of stuff, but like,
Sure.
if you take like a 70 kg black belt from now against a 70 kg black belt from 15 years ago, you can bet your house on it that the 70 kg black belt would destroy the black belt. And it's no fault of the other black belt. He's still a black belt, but there's just so much new stuff. Now, again, I think, like, you know, Hodger Gracie might be the only person that could come like break the logic, but
Marcelo Garcia.
And Marcelo, like, again, Marcelo is like one of my students was actually telling me this yesterday, I think it was. He was like, he went down a massive Ryan Hall rabbit hole.
Yep.
So he'd gotten like down that rabbit hole. Like, I've been there, done that rabbit
We've
hole.
all done that. Yeah.
He ended up on the video of Marcelo rolling with Ryan Hall. And like, he was just like, how is Marcelo making Ryan Hall look like a white belt?
Yeah.
Marcelo makes everyone look like white belts. It's actually ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, obviously Ryan Hall and Eddie Bravo are different, but have you seen Eddie Bravo rolling with Marcelo Garcia?
That's actually, that was one of the things where I was like, because my old gym would have been very 10 Planet. Like, they loved their Eddie Bravo stuff. I think it had something to do with the amount of weed being smoked. But like, they were big into lockdown and the rubber guard and all that kind of stuff. And then I watched a video of Marcelo, and like, my game is like super, like, I played butterfly guard since I was a blue belt. Like, I love butterfly guard. So like, massive parts of it are Marcelo style. And I've obviously stolen elements from Marcelo, but watching that video for me just kind of said, I'm not learning any more of that rubber guard stuff. That's, you know, and I mean, like, man, Marcelo's like, yeah.
I mean, Marcelo is the outlier of all outliers, right? It's him, Hodger, and Gordon for me. But like, regardless of that, like, I think the 10th Planet system does get a bad rap, and I'll say this: like, Eddie designed the 10th Planet system to be a defensive structure in MMA, right? Yeah. And I think for that, it's probably very beneficial. There are probably things in the 10th Planet system that work really well in MMA to stop you absorbing punches, I'm sure, right? Like, there are rubber guard players that are able to pull it off at a decent level of competition and fine, right? Now, obviously, the guys that have come out of 10th Planet, like Gio, like Keith Kokorian, like John Blank, that are doing really well at the highest levels, right? They've gone and they've adapted their own thing and whatever. And whilst, sure, in sport jiu-jitsu, some of the 10th Planet stuff doesn't seem to have as much of a technical standing as other things, there is absolutely innovations that Eddie has made, like Dogfight, like Lockdown, that can work, right? And do work.
Oh yeah.
And have a standing. And I know that you weren't saying anything like negative about 10th Planet, but it's like, there's definitely, it's definitely seen as like the dirty thing in the corner, right? Whereas like I went out to 10th Planet LA, and I'll tell you my experiences. I was a white belt at the time, went out to 10th Planet. I wasn't allowed to train in Eddie's classes because you had to be a blue belt under Eddie. That's fine. I understand that. That's fine. But I had a lot of success against some guys, and I got royally destroyed by some guys too, right? So it kind of felt like the same as everything. It kind of felt like the same as every gym. If I came to T45, I may have some success against some guys, and I'm going to get destroyed against some other guys, right?
100%. Yeah, but that's every gym.
It's the same. Like, it's exactly the same. The
biggest thing I've kind of taken on with my own jiu-jitsu, I think, and like, I hate this whole like, oh, that's like, you know, you see it a lot on Instagram where it's like someone puts up a technique video and everyone's like, oh, that would never work.
Yep.
I'm like, I hate that because it just brings this like putting people down into the whole thing. Like, and that's a whole different aspect. Like, but my whole thing is just like, it might work. Like, give it like, try it, go try it and see does it work. If it doesn't work, then don't bring it into your game. But like, you know, I'm literally like, I've learned stuff from like white belts and blue belts have shown me weird things and I'm like, oh, I'm stealing that and saying I made it up. Like, but you know, you just gotta like, it's so easy to be like narrow-minded about those things. Whereas like, if you're a bit more open-minded about techniques, you're one, going to progress faster, and two, your jiu-jitsu will be better for it because you're going to have a lot more influences to your game. Like if I said like, I don't play rubber guard, like I know it, like I've studied it and I've drilled it and I've gone through it. Like I understand how it works and I understand how to avoid it. But my big, like what I always say to the lads in the gym is go learn it. If you're struggling with something, like say you keep getting heel hooked, are you better off learning how to escape being heel hooks, or are you better off learning how to heel hook? You're probably better off going and learning how to heel hook, because when you understand how to do it, you're more likely to be able to understand what your opponent needs to do to submit you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you go and focus on the escapes, then you're just literally, it's kind of like patching over the problem, you know? So like, I think learn as much as you can from everyone, because that's what's cool about jiu-jitsu, you know?
I agree. I mean, you know, like I used to play rubber guard, never any good at it. So I kind of just expanded from it. But you know, Jack Sear, right? You heard of Jack Sear? So yeah,
we're actually good buddies.
Yeah. I mean, Jack recently got promoted to brown belt, so big shout out to Jack, and also big shout out to Nathan Kay, who got promoted at the same time. And man, you don't want to play with Jack Sear's rubber guard. You just don't. Like, he's going to catch you with something fucking crazy, and it's probably going to be a go-go plot that puts you to sleep, right? Like, that's probably what's going to happen. You know, it's, you know, and this is the thing, like, styles make fights and styles make people. Rubber guard may not work for you as Ciaran, brown belt and T45, but it may work for Jack, who's some ridiculously flexible motherfucker that manages to get his feet in places that just shouldn't be humanly possible. This is the thing, and as you say, I think you're right to, and I think this is probably a lovely place to end. Actually, is like, learn everything you can, because that's a beautiful rule for life. You just learn everything you can, and in the same way that Bruce Lee would say, is like, disband, do away with what doesn't work and keep what's good.
Yeah, that's 100%. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, I know I joked about it, but like, you know, you don't know jiu-jitsu. Like,
yeah,
really,
it's true.
like, at the end of the day, you don't, like, you know, like, I understand parts of it, but I don't understand it. Like, there's so much to learn. There's too much for any one person to have it all in their head. So that's kind of, you know, that's kind of it.
Absolutely. And before I close this out, could I get you please to tell people where can they get hold of you? What is your gym? Where can they find it post-lockdown? Everything.
Yeah. So in terms of getting in touch with me, I'm Ciaran Brohan on Facebook. I'm Creonte Ugly on Instagram.
We didn't talk about that, but I did want to talk about that. Maybe next time we'll talk about that.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, at some point I need to understand what Creonte Ugly is.
You can ask it. You can ask off air. I won't go into it too much.
All right.
So yeah, Creonte Ugly on Instagram, and the gym is T45 Jiu Jitsu. And yeah, T45 Jiu Jitsu on Instagram, YouTube, and T45.ie is the website. So that's pretty much it.
Beautiful.
And quick shout out to my sponsors as well, VHTS, for sorting me out with this. Sorry,
wonderful jumper.
And yeah, that's pretty much it as far as I can think.
Beautiful. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And it's always nice. Like I often get, or there's a misconception that this podcast is a jiu-jitsu podcast, and it's not a jiu-jitsu podcast in any way, shape or form, but it's always good to sit down and shoot the breeze about jiu-jitsu for a couple of hours. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you very much.
No, I enjoyed it, man. Thanks very much for having me on.
No problems at all.